everybody, and welcome back to Joygasm, video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, and Bethesda decides to take us on a journey in episode 325 today, September 25th, 2023. We're going to be going right into our topic of the day, which is Starfield gameplay impressions. So there's no need to skip ahead whatsoever. So this is the big game that Bethesda has been working on for quite some time now. It's apparently the first new IP they have done in 25 years. And this has also been the game that Microsoft has really pinned a lot of its hopes on just because of the types of previous games that have fallen short of gamer expectations. So it's been interesting to see when this game came out. I was like, okay, let's see what Todd, Howard, and company have been up to in terms of this big magnum opus. And I have a lot of things to say. I can say that I have now, as of this recording, put in 106 hours of gameplay. Yet at the same time, I have only gotten about 31% of the way through in terms of the progress of the game. So a lot is left for me to do. And I think it really speaks to the notion that this game encourages you as a player to go off the beaten path and really plunge you into that notion of search and discovery, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So in terms of what I've been able to establish, and let me get my notes all prepared here because I wrote down quite a few little details here. I want to first talk about the game loop. So the game loop consists of search and discovery, collecting items and equipment that you can then go and craft if you would like. And then you have combat, which then leads you to gaining experience and leveling up, which then unlocks more of the story. So in terms of the narrative progression, that's what happens. And then it just rinse and repeat, so to speak, going back into, okay, now that I've leveled up, I have more of the story. Now I have more different trajectories and mission assignments to go check out. And so as a result, I'm going back to search and discovery. And it works really well. Like there is a very organic approach to how this game loop is integrated. And I really like it because it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to do that game loop in that specific order. I can branch off and maybe I only want to do combat. Maybe I decide I want to be a mercenary for hire, or maybe I only want to search and discover. Maybe I just want to explore and leave the combat for another time. Whatever that case may be, it's nice how I'm able to choose what it is that I want to do within the structure, if you will, of the game loop. I want to get two things out of the way that are negatives about this game. First of all, the UI UX is not a good experience. I think that they were attempting to create something that has more of a utilitarian feel overall. But I think one of the problems is, and Bethesda is actually known for this in terms of Fallout and some of their other titles, but when you get plunged into a world as expansive as this, and especially with the approach that they've taken, it's important that the gamers really get a good idea, get really comfortable, familiar with how the UI UX functions. And when you're dealing with star maps and you're trying to figure out your inventory, you're looking at your ship, you're looking at these other types of little aspects within the menu system. My experience has been one, at least initially, first of all, I was completely intimidated. I didn't know where anything was located. It was very much trial and error. And I wish that Bethesda had at least put some kind of like little overlays or tool tips to help kind of guide you. I'm not saying I want to be handheld through the entire process, but in terms of just having some additional little pop-ups that or something, some sort of overlays that say, oh, hey, by the way, if you're looking for this, this is where this is located. This is how this works. The same can be said for the actual star maps. So like when I'm first playing this game, I really had a hard time navigating between the star systems versus the solar systems versus being actually on, like, say, a planet's surface and trying to figure out, like, how does this flow work? Like, if I want to just see one of the three, how do I get to that? And then are there any types of shortcuts that you can use, which there are. But the problem is that I had to discover this on my own. And that's part of the search and discovery that I did not enjoy. That's something that I think has been a bit of a pain point for a lot of folks when they first get introduced to this game, is that the menu system just seems very layered, very heavy. And there are, like, the indicators that you see are not very prominent in terms of how to actually execute on something. To give you an example of this, there was one where I could not figure out how to actually launch my ship to another destination. And now that I've been playing, I have, like I said earlier, I have over 100 hours. I've become familiar with it. I know how to work it. There are certain types of shortcuts that you can do. Like, for instance, if I'm deep inside one of the menu systems, if you just hold down the B button on the Xbox controller, it actually will exit you out, as opposed to just tapping the B button, which you have to, it backs you out of this very layered UI experience. And that can be a bit tedious at times, where it's like, all I want to do is get back to the action, but now I've got to exit. Oh, now I'm actually out of whatever it is I'm looking at. So that is one of the negatives of this game. The second negative is, of course, the bugs. Now, Bethesda is renowned for making these really immersive, innovative, terrific games, but at the same time, especially when it comes to their RPGs, there have always been a litany of bugs that, luckily, the studio over time, and even the modding community, will make various patches and new expansions and DLCs that address a lot of those show-stopping bugs. But in terms of my personal experience, I've lost manual saved games where it's just gone. Like, luckily, for some reason, the quick saves still remain, but I've had instances where I've done a manual save on something that's very important to me, and it's just gone. That is an A bug. That is an A-class bug, show-stopping bug. Like that, this game should not have been launched without those things being ironed out first. I've had game crashes left and right. I've had it where it's loading a planet surface and it's just a black screen that stays in perpetuity, and you see the little loading animated icon in the corner. There have been other issues too within the game performance itself. But I do believe that, having said all that, the actual game itself is so fun to play that I overlook a lot of those shortcomings. So super cool, be able to kind of figure that stuff. So let's talk about the Outpost, building an outpost. In my particular playthrough, I have made a big focus on just having fun figuring out how this whole thing works. The Outpost is Starfield's version of user-generated content. And there are two main parts to this. One is the Outpost, and the other is building a ship, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in terms of the Outpost, it has been a very fun experience. And it has been a bit of a journey for me in terms of figuring out how I am supposed to build and expand using this Outpost. Because once again, there aren't any kind of comprehensive instruction as to how all this stuff works. And I think that Bethesda did that by design, in the sense that they were encouraging more of having trial and error, being able to stumble upon different types of means to be able to eventually get to a point of unlocking and being able to expand more. Again, it took me a while to figure everything out, but now I have a much more comfortable understanding of how this stuff works. You know, as I'm talking about this, I think a solution would have been to have had, because like currently, let me just slow down a little bit here. currently, the way it works is if they are introducing you to a brand new component of, say, building an outpost where like you've just constructed some kind of harvesting apparatus, or you've created like your very first module or building or whatever you want to call it, it's usually met with like an overlay. Like you get this overlay of text that pops up and explains kind of what you've just unlocked and what you're doing, and to look different things to look out for. The problem is that that's an awful lot of text. Like you're looking at paragraphs of text that's trying to explain what you're starting to get yourself into. Now, I don't necessarily have a huge issue with the text itself, but I do have an issue with it being nothing but text. I have seen solutions that other game developers have done with similar instances where you have like a little video, it's like a looping video that's kind of like the size of a little pip, right? Like a little small thumbnail video that plays alongside the text that you see. Like for instance, if you were to play God of War, right? God of War has an ability tree that as you progress, you can unlock different types of combat skills. And what you do is if you want to preview one of those fighting abilities or whatever, you can essentially roll over one of them, or even if you want to click on it. The thing is that it gives you a description, but then it also has like a demonstration of what that particular ability does. And I think that Starfield would benefit heavily with this type of approach, simply because there's just so much to take in and digest and figure out in terms of how you want to move forward. And I think for someone like myself, and I think I speak for all the gamers, when I say that I think it's important that you set the gamer up for success in that way, where you inform the gamer, again, I'm not saying painstakingly hold our hands, but there needs to be more to inform us with, so that way we can actually expedite our process of whatever that may be. If it's crafting, or if it's building an outpost, if it's building a ship, if it's getting used to the map system, whatever that may be. I think that would be one of the solutions that would have been really helpful in this instance. Not to mention the fact that, given the fact that this is a sci-fi game, it's in the future, it lends itself to the aesthetic of being this explorer. You're the scientist, you're really immersed in tech and whatnot. It would make perfect sense to have certain types of these types of video loop thumbnails that exist. Anyway, you're welcome. Moving along with the building an outpost section or feature, it is interesting to look at how these items share a symbiotic relationship with XP. And I've only recently gotten a much better idea of how this works. You have items that they encourage you to harvest. So like you have different types of resources. And that's been a lot of fun to just be introduced to all these different names, resources. I am not a geologist. I am not familiar with every single type of rock or mineral that exists. So I can't really comment on if they made up any of these resources or if they are actually real world, actually existing minerals. Some of them I see like gold, aluminum, those titanium. Sure, I know those. There are some exotic names of minerals in this game, and I'm just like, I don't know if that is a Bethesda thing or if that is actually something that truly exists. So it's been a learning experience, and I've enjoyed that. But I digress. When it comes to the other side of things, like having different types of parts, you can either stumble upon them as you're exploring, say, like an abandoned science facility, or you go to some other type of building structure, and perhaps there are a bunch of spacers there, or the Crimson Fleet is there, and you're battling your way through this building, and you can come across other types of components that you can use. Both the resources, the mineral resources, and these different types of crafting components are both used in order to make more items available for your outpost. So by default, like when you start out, they do already have like kind of like a predetermined list of items that are readily available to you that you can play with. And there are a fair amount of items. But then I found myself like thinking, okay, well, I'm sure there's going to be more. And looking through the various types of skill trees and badges, and I'll talk about that in a moment, there are like as you level up, then the more and more advanced and exotic types of items become available based on you actually creating them and unlocking them. So there's a whole kind of symbiotic system that exists in the game that once you understand it, then it does make a whole lot of sense. It is really cool, but it did take a while for me to understand all of the logistics of how this stuff actually works in tandem with each other. So to give you an idea, one of the big gameplay mechanics of this, as it applies to search and discovery, is when you're going around looking for resources. So when you go to different planets, you can scan the planets. You can figure out like what kind of resources are abundant on any given planet's surface. You go down, you can then create various types of harvesting apparatus that basically bring up those resources. And then there's a whole kind of ecosystem that's involved with the harvesting itself. So then you have to take those back to your outpost. And then on top of that, you have to get into the idea of creating like storage bins and launch pad links, which I suppose I could talk about. Yeah, I could talk about it now. The idea is that you have resources, badging, and crafting. These are the trifecta, if you will, of how to expand and build on your outpost. Now, in my experience, the outpost is an important feature within the game that can make your life a whole lot easier. Prior to me getting in or building an outpost, you have the lodge, which is where you start out, you meet your crew, and you have your own bedroom where they have that little locker or safe that essentially you can store as many items as you want. It never maxes out. But the problem is that it's very laborious to have to constantly come back to the lodge to unload the items that you have collected. And so instead, what makes a lot more sense is to be able to have an outpost that you design that has all the different types of features. And I guess I can go into a little bit about this, because I'm sure one of the big questions is, well, what are some of the features that this has that makes it convenient? Well, first of all, for instance, you can unlock an actual nav table, which was fantastic because one of the things that prior to me unlocking this particular item, if I wanted to go somewhere, I'd have to hoof it back to my ship and then take off and go somewhere. The whole hoofing back and forth eats up a lot of time. So when you unlock this nav system, this nav table, you can actually choose where you'd like to go next without leaving your outpost. You can stay inside the building without hoofing it to your ship and then transport yourself somewhere else. That's really helpful. The other thing is that they have various types of crafting tables that you can build. And so it doesn't matter if it's a spacesuit crafting table or it's a weapons crafting table or food, or I can't remember all the different ones, but medicine. What's nice is that I'm able to actually I basically created kind of this arts and crafts room with all these tables. So that way, once again, I don't have to leave to go back to the lodge in order to take care of these different items that I'd like to perhaps fabricate. Now, I have heard that some people will build a ship and make it so large that they can actually have those tables exist on their ship. So that's even another solution too. As you're going from place to place and you're collecting resources and items, components, that sort of thing, you can actually just stay on your ship and then continue to craft these things out to unlock more expansions for your outpost. I haven't done that yet because my focus has been just on outpost management. It has not been to build my own ship yet. I'm using the same ship that, not that I start out with, but I went down on a specific mission, which I won't go into details. I don't want to give you any spoilers, but let's just call it the Mantis. It's the Razor Leaf ship. And I've been really pleased with that. And I eventually do plan to get into shipbuilding, but for now, like I've really predominantly been in the Outpost section. But I made a note of that. I think I watched someone's YouTube channel where they talk about, or maybe I saw it on Reddit, but it made a lot of sense how this person was talking about. They had built this big ship. They had basically all those different crafting tables built and existing on their ship. So that way that became kind of their central hub. Makes sense. I'll probably do that as well, but I'm having fun with the Outpost as it stands. Now, the badging side of things is interesting. So you have, I think, 5 sections or silos, if you will, that you can drop. Like as you gain XP, you level up, and then it gives you a skill point that then you can apply to one of these 5 siloed sections. One is physical. One is, I don't know if it's called combat, but it's basically like being able to be better with your weapons, your weaponry. The third one is social. Then you have science and tech. So these act as gatekeepers, where the idea is that if you unlock a badge, then you have to perform a certain criteria in order to have the second phase, or I should say second level of that badge become unlocked. Every badge has, I want to say, 4 stages or 4 levels. So you unlock a badge. Initially, you have kind of like the high level abilities that pertain to that badge get unlocked. And then once you fulfill said criteria, let's say, for instance, you have to, I don't know, craft 5 items, or maybe you have to scan 10 planets, whatever that is, then it makes the second tier unlocked. But you don't automatically earn that. You have to spend another skill point based off of you leveling up in order to unlock the second stage and the third stage and the fourth stage. Each one of those stages requires a skill point on top of the skill point that you initially spent on the badge. The challenge in this is that this is where the grind starts to come in, because the badges are basically the gatekeepers to various types of abilities that make you a much more seasoned character, whether it's piloting your ship or it's in weaponry or being able to persuade characters who are politically motivated or enemies or whatever. Or like one of my favorite sections is actually the science tier, where there are all kinds. I mean, you have zoology, you have botany, you have, my goodness, like so many medical research. I can't even begin to list how many there are, but they are all very fascinating to me, and I want to be able to unlock each and every one of them. I think in terms of balancing for the game, I do think that again, this is just my personal opinion, but due to the fact that there are a sheer number of these badges that exist, I think I would have liked it. And honestly, this is something that Bethesda could drop to us as like a kind of a fix. But if they could make gaining the levels or the skill points perhaps 20% easier, I think that would fix kind of more of the sense of grind. Because when you first start out this game, and well, first of all, like I said earlier, you're having to figure out just how this whole system works. But then on top of that too, you're really having to spend a lot of time doing various things in order to gain those skill points. So I don't think I'm being too unrealistic when I suggest maybe having a patch go out that makes it 20% easier to be able to unlock more skill points. Just because, like I said, first of all, the badges by themselves, there are a ton of badges. Not to mention the fact that each badge, you basically multiply that times 4. Because, and you know, again, it's not like, oh, I have 4 skill points, I'll just put them all immediately into this particular badge. It doesn't work that way. You have to unlock that, whatever that thing is. And this brings me to the second point on this. In my experience, I don't think that the different types of activities that you do stacks, Because, for instance, let's say I unlock one of the badges that gives me a certain type of skill. And let's say I've been doing a lot of whatever that badge requires in order to unlock skills 2, 3, or the levels 2, 3, and 4. I don't think the game actually records or keeps track of all of that activity. I think it's only when that particular level gets unlocked that then that criteria becomes activated and you start accumulating, whatever it is, scan 10 planets, and then that's satisfied, which then unlocks the next level. If I was someone to offer a suggestion to Bethesda, I do think that would also be a nice fix. Simply because if I'm, and it makes logical sense. If I, as an explorer or whatever, an astronaut, if I'm doing something in a repetitive sense that goes well beyond whatever that first tier or that first level is of a badge, then there should be some kind of reward based off of that, because I'm still gaining the experience, whether or not, regardless that I've unlocked those other levels or not. That would be a nice stack system where it's like, I've unlocked a badge and, oh, by the way, and you see it's like, oh, by the way, you've done enough of these things that will unlock this level and then this level. Because as it stands right now, it screams grind. It's like, oh, you've unlocked this badge and we don't care that you've done the equivalent of whatever the levels 2, 3, and 4 criteria require. Now, we're only going to let you do those things as you activate them. I feel like that's a flawed approach. I would prefer more of a stacking mechanism, because then that would expedite more of the XP, which then would expedite more of the skill points being dropped, which would expedite more of, like, say, for instance, the Outpost in terms of what it is that become available. You can see how there's like a domino effect, but I think in its current state, the game somewhat stumbles over itself in the sense that everything is so locked that you're just like, okay, I'm excited to play this game. I want to have a sense of momentum, but it just seems like this is part of more of the grind fest itself. Now, the crafting is the third component. I was talking about resources, badges, and crafting. So crafting has more to do with what they call a research lab. Now, I feel like that title is misleading because I was looking for an actual location. I was looking for like a building with the sign that says research lab on it. In actuality, it's a little peripheral device that you unlock. And it has like a little keyboard and a screen. Like, you can put it in your Outpost if you want to, and that is called a research lab. And it's like, guys, come on. Need to be a little more specific with like how this stuff works, because again, it was a head scratcher where I was thinking to myself, why am I not able to unlock more items for the Outpost? I know that there are more that exist, but for some reason I'm missing something here. And lo and behold, I realized, oh my goodness, it's this thing. And so it was something I had actually put as a decorative element in my Outpost. I didn't realize it actually had some kind of interactivity to it, or that it was called the research lab. So I feel like that title's misleading. They need, I don't know, wordsmithing would have been helpful in that regard. But the idea is that as you collect more resources and as you collect more, like, say, just different types of components that you see on the floors and desks of places that you visit, you then combine those things to actually craft and level up your crafting skills within the research lab, which then, as you unlock more of that, you then unlock more tiers for advanced modules and more advanced decorative elements, furniture, whatever then they have like multiple sections in there, which again, I like that. I love how like there's like this very deep, comprehensive list of items that you can do to just really, I mean, you could spend days building your Outpost, changing things up, updating various things. I mean, that by itself is a big win. Like, I really do enjoy doing all that. I just wish it wouldn't take me so long to have to unlock all of these different components. Because again, I've put over 100 hours into this game. Most of those hours are based on me just kind of going on my own way. I'm not pursuing the main story very much. I do it here and there if I just feel like, okay, I'm ready to divulge a bit more. But the meat and potatoes of my experience has been about search and discovery, about trying to unlock more of the science abilities, trees and whatnot. And that's where I've really had my fun factor go up, is being able to just fantasize as being this scientific explorer, so to speak, even though one of my traits is industrialist, which I suppose is not too far from that. Oh, I was looking at my notes, and one of the other, so like another critique I have, and again, I don't know if this actually exists in the game or not. I mentioned earlier how in your outpost, you can have various types of peripherals or systems that allow you to really take care of a lot of things in one place. So you're not having to hoof it all over, right? So what's nice is that you can have kiosks in your outpost. So if you have a bounty, for instance, that you need to pay, you can pay it right there from your outpost. You don't have to go to that planet and make a payment or risk getting arrested or whatever. There's also a kiosk that you can place in there that provides different types of missions or bounties or, different kinds of, I can't remember exactly what they are. They're basically like these side missions that you can do. And once they are fulfilled, then you get a certain amount of credits from that, which is, really, really fun because sometimes I'm in the mood to just go out and explore and see who I bump into, what situations arise as I'm spontaneously doing my thing. But at the same time, also, like if I'm like, I just kind of want to get some XP and some credits and stuff, I can use that. That, in addition to the various crafting tables, all make for a really fun time because then I'm actually spending time in this outpost I built. It's not just something that's like a fun aesthetic, like, okay, I've built my outpost and now I'm going to continue on with the rest of the game. The outpost becomes an intrinsic part of the overall experience. The one thing that I have not seen, so I don't know if it exists in the game or not, maybe it's locked behind one of the various tiers that I have to do in order to unlock more advanced or exotic modules for the outpost or who knows what. But I have noticed that you cannot sell resources or items from your outpost. That is a head scratcher to me because if in my case, I have created this buttoning network of outposts. So I have my main HQ, and then I have these smaller outposts that exist on other planets where the ships are bringing in the resources, landing, and filling up my storage crates with these things, right? So my HQ is like the main place that I reside at. I do all these different types of activities. And the only way that I know how to sell, like let's say for instance, I have all of these storage facilities that have who knows how many resources. And I want to be able to make money off that because they're just going to get replenished. I have to like load up on my person or use, there is a type of item that you can get for your outpost where it can load up the resources onto your ship. But then see, that's the problem that I have right now is that I haven't invested in building like a huge crate storage cargo frigate yet. I just have my little ship. And so that is a bit of a slog for me as well, because that means that I have to actually either load up, which by the way, my storage in my ship is already filled up. Like I can't actually utilize that particular, I don't know, whatever that device is that will auto load my ship with the resources. So that means I have to bring it onto my own character, which then causes me to be severely encumbered. And then I have to slow walk it to my ship. And then in order to sell it, I either have to go to the trade authority or I can say do some trading with like another cargo ship that I happen to stumble upon in outer space. To me, like, that is a big oopsie daisy if that indeed does not exist for the Outpost. I think that I'm really hoping that there is another type of kiosk that gets unlocked that allows me to sell straight from my Outpost. So if I want to go in there and say sell all, it should be like a couple of button presses, done. That would be really, really nice, because then again, it goes back to the flow, right? Like the being able to expedite different types of tasks that otherwise can easily become a slog or a grind. And I understand that, like, within the systems design, they probably are being intentional with some of that because they want the game to last longer. But at the same time, you need to strike a perfect balance with the gamers in the sense that, on the one hand, you want them to have that sense of earning, like, say, leveling up or whatever. But when gamers start to feel like this was just in place to block them and to force them to have to do something in order to make the game seem bigger and longer, that's when the game begins to fail. So just, food for thought. That's my own opinion. But I've noticed that has been a reoccurring theme within other folks who have reviewed the game as well, where I remember watching the IGN review, and the gentleman who was reviewing the game was alluding to that, talking about how, like, his first, I think it was like he was talking about the first 12 hours or so of gameplay that he was doing really did feel like a slog, like you're having to slow down. You're not able to gain the momentum that you were expecting. And so the fun factor starts to take a hit. But then once you actually start unlocking things and having that cascading effect, then suddenly there is a big uptick in terms of the fun factor itself. So anyway, I really do enjoy the Outpost experience. I'm still building it out. I'm a long ways away from actually being satisfied with, like, how it all looks, how it functions. And I really do like the idea of the resource management, being able to have a network that's linked together. The actual research lab itself, now that I understand what it is and how it works, I'm having fun with actually creating things and it supercharges my already interested. Didn't really say that correctly. Basically, like, it supercharged my interest, or supercharges my pre-existing interest. There we go. When it comes to search and discovery and being able to harvest minerals, that sort of thing, because it gives purpose to that. So it's like, now that I understand, it's like, okay, let's go out and find some more, and let's be able to upgrade more. So yeah, I think the system itself works largely. It's just there are these couple pain points that I think needed to be ironed out. Take that for what you will. Let's pivot over to ships. So ships are your home away from home. So when you first start up the game, you are a miner, and then you go to the lodge and you realize, oh wow, this is kind of like the nice, hearthy home, if you will. But I found myself not really going there as often once I started really getting into the game. And I think one of the problems with it is the fact that you can later on, like, kind of sort of have it set up where, like, if you select the lodge on the list of options that exist on the planet, and you select travel, then you can go, and then you're basically outside the lodge, so then you can walk in. But I mean, even that took some time to figure out how to do. I was just at first just landing on the planet, and then I'm having to, like, take the transit over to where the lodge existed. Again, it's just that slog fest. The ships themselves, though, the ships look fantastic. Really do enjoy how they have come up with this kit system that allows you to customize the ship the way you want it. You can have different types of colors and decals associated with it. It's a very deep system, and I think that they were very wise to have this as part 2 of their user-generated content, because you have... And again, I have not really scratched the surface on this. I kind of went in there to check it out a little bit, but I haven't really utilized it too much. there is a lot to choose from, and that's a very good thing. And being able to personalize your own ship to the type of style that you like. I've seen a ton on social media from different gamers who have done, I mean, I've seen like a Batmobile, oh no, not a Batmobile, a Batwing inspired ship. I've seen some other ships too that loosely resemble other types of well-known ships. But then also too, there are completely original designs that I find really neat to appreciate and look at and admire. I think that there's a lot to be said for that. The ship battles are very reminiscent of Star Wars Squadrons. If you've played that game, I like that game. I think it's fun. I think the ship battles in this game are fun. I think there is a bit of personality in being able to have comms being active where you hear, say for instance, like the Crimson Fleet trying to sound like they're all overconfident and then realizing who I am, which again, I have the Mantis ship and have this reputation built up. And so when they realize who I am, they sometimes will flee because like, oh, it's the Mantis. And then they take off or whatever. So it is a lot of fun. The actual weaponry that you can buy and upgrade for your ship is a lot of fun to get into. Again, that's a cousin of the Outpost in terms of resource management, but it's more simplified in the sense of it being more about, okay, if you're using certain types of weapons, it uses various amounts of energy for your ship. And so you get to kind of tweak that back and forth. Again, so many components. The limited storage is something I mentioned earlier. This is a pain. This is one of those situations where buying a ship is very expensive and credits don't flow for a long time in the game. The game wants you to be this entrepreneurial spirit where like you go out, whether you're doing say mercenary work in order to gain it, or let's say as you're doing mercenary work and you come across some of these bad guys safes or trunks or storage units or whatever, then maybe you can find credits that way. But I mean, even selling different types of items does not yield a lot of credits. And so again, that is more of a gatekeeping mentality where usually in other games that are similar in their approach, there is some way to be able to amass credits it's not cheating, it's not breaking the game, but it's something that you have to, like, you realize, oh, there's this one way of going about it that like I can make a decent amount, which again helps to expedite or have that snowball effect occur more quickly in terms of getting what it is that I'm after. And one of the workarounds that I've done is when I'm collecting, say, resources or items off of my adventures, like I said earlier, my ship's storage is already full. Like that ship does not have a lot of storage. So I end up just dropping everything on the floor of my ship. And luckily the game still remembers that all those items exist on the floor of my ship. So I can go anywhere and they are right there ready for the taking. And luckily it doesn't count against the limited capacity weight of the ship itself. That's the only way I can think of being able to collect all this. And again, I don't know if that was by design by Bethesda or if that was just kind of like, oh, well, it's there. It's part of our physics system and everything else. So, but, the weight situation, that is a bit of a pain. And it's led to some bugs. I talked about how there are a lot of bugs in the game. One of the bugs that I have realized is, so your character can only carry so much. Once they go beyond a certain point, then they become what is called encumbered. So then you can't actually run as fast as you want to. Your oxygen levels start to drop and your CO2 levels start to build up. And so once again, it's that trade-off of like, how much do you want to carry versus how quickly do you want to traverse the planet that you're on. The bug comes into play because the encumberment side of things actually doesn't have a limit. So like, to give you an idea, my character at this point in time has a limit of, I want to say 185 I think that's what it is. I don't know if it's 185 pounds or what they classify, but the numerical value is 185. I have had thousands of pounds on my character. So it's like you're encumbered, but you can keep stacking that up. One of the bugs I've come across is if there comes a certain point where if you are carrying too many items, the game will begin to crash. And so, like, for instance, if I sit down to wait 24 hours, the game will crash. It will not cycle out of that 24 hours and allow me to resume my gameplay. If I'm going from between, say, like my ship to another planet and I'm that over encumbered, the game will crash. I have to unload, I have to drop all those items down to a point where the game will no longer crash. So Bethesda, if you're listening, you got to fix that. And it's a very simple fix. Like, if you want to place a cap on how much a character can be encumbered, then place a cap on it. And that way, I mean, it does become kind of outlandish to think about one person being able to carry around thousands of pounds. It's just not realistic. And especially in a game like this the presentation of this game definitely leans toward being a more realistic, mature approach to, exploration, to science, to the notion of like what's out there kind of thing. It's not as much of a like over the top, unrealistic shooter like some of these other titles, right? So something to think about. I mean, again, I think that could also be a part of the patch update. Not a big deal. But as it stands, I have learned, okay, I need to keep like basically like if I'm at like 1,000 pounds, I need to like start offloading different items because I know that the game starts to become unstable. Basically, the more stuff, the more crap you have on your character, then the more unstable the game gets. So when you're starting to reach like say 3,000 plus pounds, that's when you're really starting to get into that game crashing scenario. To see where I left off. Oh, okay. So we're still talking about ships. Another question mark that I have is why didn't Bethesda include a build a new ship button? This is such a head scratcher for me where like what limited exposure I've had to this involves you can either buy a brand new ship or you can modify a pre-existing ship that's in your fleet. But I don't see anywhere an option to actually start from scratch, build a brand new ship. The only thing that I've seen is I have to take a pre-existing ship and then start to modify it into a new ship. I've seen people on YouTube demonstrate how like they'll take a ship in their fleet and basically they just delete all the pieces. The ship still exists because it's registered as part of their fleet, but they have to delete all the pieces out of the ship so that you start with scratch or start from scratch in that case and then build up a new ship. That is, like I said, that is such a head scratcher because if you're going to encourage this feature of being able to customize your own ship, then have a new ship button be included with the whole experience when it comes to that. Again, I'm just like, wait, what? Not a deal breaker by any stretch, but at the same time, you're like, guys, like, how did you guys not include that? Okay. But yeah, I love the variety of ship parts. I think the ships look glorious. They're handsome, amazing, inspiring designs, and the idea of being able to customize it to your liking, yeah, that's just a lot of fun. I've already talked a lot about the skills and the badges, so I think I can skip over that just because there's just a lot more to discuss. But the next thing I want to talk about is the combat. The combat is very satisfying. Bethesda is no stranger when it comes to first-person shooters. In addition to the Fallout series, they've also had other studios within the Bethesda umbrella such as like Wolfenstein, for example. And so it's great to be able to see that the gameplay of the combat mechanics is very tight, very satisfying. The variety of weapons, I know for a fact I haven't discovered all the weaponry yet, but what I have discovered, very, very cool. Love the different types of styles of weaponry. The guns just look super fun. I love the loading animations. I love how every gun has its own persona. It feels unique unto itself. That's a big win. The planet surfaces are varied in terms of like when you land on a any given planet surface, it is very neat to be able to see the character of that particular planet. But I would have preferred to have had a bit more encounters with the various types of traversals that I have done. Now, there are moments, like for instance, with my outpost, if I'm kind of meddling in my outpost, spacers will sometimes attack and take some of my buildings offline or some of my harvesters offline, and that's exhilarating because now I'm having to defend my outpost. I think that's really cool. There are planets that do have alien life, and that's also fun to be able to encounter them, scan them if they are being hostile, to engage in combat with them, that sort of thing. That is all very fun. But there are an awful lot of planets where it's just desolate. There is no life whatsoever. It's just this very hostile environment in terms of the planet itself. So from wanting to engage in combat, there isn't as much of that. But I don't think it's too bad. I do think it's nice how you can go explore any given planet, and odds are you're going to come across some kind of outpost or facility, some sort of civilization perhaps. Many different opportunities exist to be able to go into that combat. I also enjoy what did I write down here? I don't know what I wrote. That note makes no sense, so I'm going to skip over it. Going back to search and discovery, I love discovering new planets. I do think Bethesda has really struck a unique chord with this game in the sense that they do want to have an emphasis on what it's like to be an astronaut, to be an explorer, to go out beyond our solar system. Even within our solar system, it's very neat to be able to go and visit the familiar planets, but then go beyond that and have the notion of these various star systems that are now accessible to humanity in terms of them being able to travel out and having certain places that have been colonized and other places that have yet to be discovered yet, but you as an explorer can go and discover them. That is a very neat feeling as I'm playing this game. I really do enjoy that a lot. Scanning for resources. I never thought I'd have as much fun scanning for resources as I do, because I understand the purpose of when I find various types of resources, what that means in terms of perhaps creating another outpost and collecting that material, seeing what types of new items or new expansions I get from said materials or resources. That is a lot of fun. I love scanning the flora and fauna. One of the areas that I know exists, but I haven't played with, is more, I think, of that zoology, where I've been collecting like different types of alien tissue and alien bones and who knows what, but like just a lot of this alien type of material that I haven't actually exercised for making, I don't know, concoctions or whatnot. So that's a whole other area that I have yet to discover and figure out and work around. But I love the idea that like things that you get can be used for advancements in knowledge and science, and more of my galactic footprint. I like that. Part of the search and discovery experience also has to do with when you run into other ships. The other ships is very satisfying. It's very fun to be able to have conversations, because again, like when you encounter a ship, you don't immediately know what their intentions are. Maybe they warped in there at the same time you did. Maybe they are bad folks who are looking to ambush you. You never know. But this is where Bethesda's persona really shines, is that in Bethesda games, they always have these quirky personality types, these eccentric personality types. And the dialogue is always a lot of fun to get engaged with. And this is one of the game's strong suits. I love being able to go up and I can't see what they look like. And I go back and forth on like, wouldn't it be cool to be able to see what this pilot looks like or not? They have kind of made a solution in the sense that there are certain ships that you can dock, and so you can interface with certain folks. But then there are these other situations where it's just this audio dialogue back and forth. I love it. I think it's great because space as an environment, as we, it's such an empty place. It can feel lonely. And I'm glad that in this game, you do get that sense of like, wow, I'm like the only person that's out here. And this is a very foreign place. And yet when you have another ship all of a sudden appear and you're talking with them, it brings this unique sense of familiarity to the situation, in the sense that we as humans are very social creatures. We thrive off of that. I mean, that's why social media is so big to this day, right? We can't help ourselves. We are by design, we are social creatures. And so it's interesting to be in like this futuristic sci-fi space exploration, and all of a sudden I'm having like this funny back and forth banter with another person. I don't know. I think the contrast between those two things is memorable. It's a memorable moment for sure. So I dig that. I think the final thing about Search and Discovery is the emphasis on what it's like to explore is, I think, an original take within video games. And I'll attempt to explain that a bit better, a bit more thoroughly. Because obviously you have a number of different games out there that do encourage exploration. This one is unique in the sense that it's not so drenched in fantasy. Like, because like we've had RPGs that are fantasy centric, right? You know, you have more of the medieval fantasy kind of stuff, or maybe you have other types of fantasy as well. This game has presented itself to actually be a bit more toward the realistic side of what could possibly become a reality for mankind. And I think having that more mature approach to how you survive, how you traverse, how there's like this inevitable politics that go on that are interplanetary in nature. There has been a lot of thoughtfulness and sophistication embedded into this game where, I mean, if I were to compare it to something, Star Trek, I think, is definitely in that same zone where they explore different types of philosophical situations or psychological effects or impacts that can be had. I don't watch Star Trek. I'm not a Trekkie, but I can appreciate how the show made it a point to explore some of those things. To a smaller degree when it comes to Starfield, I do think they have also been approaching this with a similar type of maturity that I appreciate. I think it's really neat because they could have very easily gone the route of you're like this, badass astronaut and like you go out and you do these different things that are very unrealistic but super cool, and I think you get what I'm saying. Overall, I think the game is a success. I know that there has been a tremendous amount of pressure on Bethesda to deliver this game to quality because Microsoft needs a win. I do think that Starfield, for the most part, is that win. I think that when you look at the amount of depth that has been applied to these different mechanics, whether it's search and discovery or it's combat or outpost management. You're customizing a ship, the overall narrative, the story itself, the quality dialogue, the great voice acting, great music. There's a lot here that is really well done. And despite the fact that there are a lot of bugs, the game is very polished in these other regards. I think that there's a lot to digest. I think there's a lot to process and enjoy and get out of with the game itself. I mentioned at the top of the show how I'm only 31% complete with the game, but I am fine with that because I'm crafting my own story, right? Like I'm able to really do a lot of these other things on my own, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I think it's a very unique experience indeed. So, I would recommend this game if you haven't checked it out yet. If you have Xbox Game Pass, it's on Game Pass, so you can download it. Really, what I do look forward to are the bug fixes. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. Is like if the game can become more stable, which I'm sure it will be, because that's what always happens, is we will benefit greatly from that. But my hat's off to Bethesda for making a game like this. I didn't know what to expect going in. When I saw the trailers, I was definitely interested, but I wasn't sure what to make of it. And I think that Starfield itself is largely successful in a lot of its endeavors. So there you have it. That wraps up this episode of Joygasm. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm, where you can enjoy exclusive perks and early access to the show. Not to mention, it financially helps me continue doing the podcast. Also, you can click on that like button as well as that subscribe button. That way you will not miss a single solitary episode of Joygasm. You can also do a search for Joygasm TV on your favorite social media platform of choice. We're on just about all of them. You can also do a search for Joygasm TV on Twitch to see me stream my gaming adventures live, such as Starfield, every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for hanging out with me this long, and I look forward to hanging out with you again next week when I talk about party animals. We'll see you then.